In this video, we're going to look at some of the obstacles to passing laws in Congress. Over the past few decades, Congress has been passing fewer and fewer laws. It's the lawmaking body of the US government, yet they're not making laws. Why? What's going on? Well, there are some obstacles built into the system, and we're going to look at a few of those. The structure of the US government is an obstacle. The parties can inhibit the passing of laws, same with the process, and of course the incentives faced by individual legislators. First one, the structure. The separation of powers within the US government creates a natural conflict between different branches or parties. For example, there could be a conflict between Congress and the president, and that might stall potential legislation. There also could be conflict between the two chambers. The House and the Senate might have different priorities, which would also be an obstacle for passing laws. And of course, underlying all of this is the conflict between the parties. When parties are controlling different aspects of government, that can also prevent laws from getting passed. That brings us to the second obstacle, which is the parties. When there is divided government, when between the House, the Senate, and the presidency, those are controlled by two different parties, it is much more difficult to get legislation passed. In principle, it would be easier to get legislation passed under unified control, when one party holds control of the House, the Senate, and the presidency. We can see by this image that those periods are relatively rare. It is not often that you get a situation where one party controls all three with a large enough majority to get laws passed. The process is also an obstacle. Even if you have a situation where there is unified control and there is the potential to pass laws, the American system has built-in veto points. There are points along the way where the process can be stopped. The committee stage, floor action, which is the final vote in the House, it could also lose in floor action on the Senate if it gets there because of the Senate filibuster, which is a supermajority requirement. In order to file a cloture vote to get to a vote, you require 60 votes. And then, of course, the president can veto the bill or even use the pocket veto, just allowing the session of Congress to expire. So there's a lot of points in the process that can make it easy to stop a piece of legislation. There's also the incentives that face individual members of Congress. When you're making a decision whether you want to pass a law or not, you must consider the agenda and the leverage. What is it you're trying to do, and what are the tools available for you to do that? For an individual member of Congress, you've got a few things to think about. The needs of your constituents or the needs of your party. Sometimes the party might be concerned with national things where locally your constituents might be concerned about something different. That could shape how you support or oppose a piece of legislation. There's also the goals. Sometimes individual members of Congress don't actually want to pass a law. They would rather take symbolic votes, votes that they know won't pass, but are popular with their constituents or popular for fundraising. During the Obama years, the Republican House of Representatives passed numerous repeal attempts to try and repeal Obamacare, even though the president would veto them. Why were they doing this? This was incredibly lucrative for them on the fundraising side of things. There's also chamber-specific incentives. For example, if you're in the minority in the Senate, you do have a lot more sway because of that supermajority threshold. And so passing a law might be more difficult because of that. More incentives. Well, passing laws can be time-consuming. This is a slide that was taken from an orientation from new incoming Democratic members of Congress. This is how they were advised to spend most of their day. They would have 4 hours in the morning on call time, a couple hours visiting constituents, 2 hours of actual work, an hour of strategic outreach, and then an hour of time to yourself to get caught up on emails. Most of those things are just other names for fundraising. Members of Congress are expected to spend most of their time raising money. And the more time they have to spend on the floor or in committee work takes away from that lucrative fundraising time. So there are individually incentives facing members of Congress that steer them away from legislative work and onto more symbolic and expressive things and fundraising. Now, as part of that, because time is scarce and attention is scarce, passing laws would eat up a lot of that time. Now, Congress is passing fewer and fewer laws over the years. Those bills are getting longer. Thinking is, if the Congress is not going to spend as much time legislating, then the bills they do pass are much larger. These are called omnibus bills that tend to be several hundred or even several thousand pages in length. And so when you're passing more laws like that, you will naturally see fewer of them getting passed. So just to recap, there are lots of obstacles in the American system to passing laws. The actual structure of the US government, the parties and the party competition, the process itself, and of course the incentives that face individual legislatures. All of these things will get in the way of trying to pass laws.